At 69, Tony Dorsett sits in silence, the weight of time heavy on his shoulders. To the world, he was the blur in blue and silver, the man who turned the impossible into highlight reels. To himself, he was something more complex, a champion carrying scars that never truly healed. Behind the Heisman Trophy, the Super Bowl ring, and the breathtaking 99-yard touchdown run lived a story that few ever dared to ask him about. A story of rivalries, betrayals, and truths too painful to share until the cheers had long faded. Dorsett was elegance wrapped in steel. A runner who glided yet punished, a man who seemed untouchable on Sundays. But no legend escapes the darker corners of the game. His career was not only defined by his speed and balance, but also by conflicts that shaped him, grudges that fueled him, secrets that haunted him. Today, for the first time, we open the vault of his memory. 5 hidden truths. 5 rivalries, heartbreaks, and betrayals that carved the man behind the myth. Stories he carried for decades, only now revealing how they shaped his legacy. Why did one of the most electrifying players in NFL history hold on to such bitterness? What moments left scars deeper than any tackle? And why, even with fame and fortune, did peace remain elusive? This is the untold story of Tony Dorsett. This is what he never forgave. Tony Dorsett was born in 1954 in the steel town of Aliquippa, Pennsylvania. The streets were tough, the mills were louder than thunder, and young men grew up hardened by the grind of survival. Out of that unforgiving soil came one of the smoothest runners football had ever seen. Dorsett was not built in a laboratory of strength and size. He was carved by resilience, shaped by determination, and fueled by a hunger to outrun the life that cornered so many of his peers. At the University of Pittsburgh, he became a phenomenon. Every cut he made felt like choreography, every sprint a defiance of physics. In 1976, he claimed the Heisman Trophy, carrying Pitt to a national championship. By the time he entered the NFL draft in 1977, the Dallas Cowboys saw him not just as a running back, but as a savior. They traded 4 draft picks to claim him, a move that would alter the future of the franchise. In Dallas, under Tom Landry's stoic watch, Dorsett thrived. He was not the bruising kind of back, but his vision and acceleration punished defenses in a way that seemed effortless. He ran with grace, but his cuts left defenders broken. His style was a contradiction, soft in stride, brutal in consequence. But behind the highlight reels lay tension. Landry's system was rigid, controlled by precision and order. Dorsett was a free spirit, more improviser than soldier. The clash between discipline and freedom was inevitable. Within the locker room, voices whispered about favoritism, about whether Dorsett truly fit the mold of the Cowboys machine. The contradictions deepened with time. He gave Dallas a Super Bowl victory in 1978, his rookie season. Yet his relationship with teammates and coaches often felt brittle. He carried the ball thousands of times, but also carried resentment. To fans, he was the elegant blur who could score from anywhere on the field. To those inside the walls of Valley Ranch, he was also a man who demanded respect and clashed when it was denied. Through the 80s, he amassed yards, Pro Bowl honors, and a place in the record books. His 99-yard run in 1983 against the Minnesota Vikings remains untouchable, a symbol of speed and perfection. Yet the spotlight also revealed cracks. Questions about his toughness, rumors of conflict, and a sense of being underappreciated gnawed at him. He was a star in a system that valued control over individuality. This was the paradox of Tony Dorsett, a legend defined by grace and balance on the field, yet driven by anger, betrayal, and hidden truths off it. He lived at the center of the Cowboys' golden years, but often felt like an outsider in his own dynasty. It is within that tension where the grudges were born. And those grudges shaped the man he became. To understand Tony Dorsett's career, you must first understand the man who shaped and shadowed it, Tom Landry. Landry was the face of discipline, the stoic general who turned the Dallas Cowboys into America's team. His fedora was more than a hat. It was a symbol of order, authority, and unwavering control. Beneath that hat was a mind that demanded precision, where every play was scripted, every movement rehearsed. For some players, that system was salvation. For Dorsett, it became a prison. When Dorsett entered the league in 1977, Landry's Cowboys were a powerhouse, The rookie running back was expected to obey the system, to fall in line with a culture that placed the coach above all. But Dorsett was not built to conform. His style thrived on instinct, cutting against the grain, reading defenses in real time. Landry's playbook wanted predictability, yet Dorsett's genius was unpredictability. That clash, born in his very first season, never truly disappeared. The breaking point came not in victories but in philosophy. Landry demanded execution to the decimal point, while Dorsett believed greatness lived in improvisation. To Dorsett, football was art. To Landry, football was engineering. Their visions collided like storm fronts, each refusing to yield. The iconic moment that defined this divide came during a nationally televised game in the early 80s. Dorsett had broken free for a long gain, improvising off script. Fans cheered. Teammates celebrated. But on the sideline, Landry's reaction was icy. He did not applaud the brilliance. He lectured about breaking away from the assigned gap. The image of Dorsett, helmet off, glaring back at his stone-faced coach, became a symbol of their silent war. For Dorsett, the insult cut deep. He was carrying the offense, giving Dallas moments that electrified fans and terrified defenses. Yet the man who controlled the team rarely gave him the respect he craved. Landry saw him as a tool in the machine, not the engine. Dorsett believed his artistry deserved recognition beyond mere utility. The conflict eroded trust. Dorsett once admitted that he felt shackled in Landry's offense, forced into patterns that dulled his instincts. He wanted freedom to create, to let his vision lead the way. Landry's refusal became a wound that never healed. Even as he gained thousands of yards and delivered a championship, the bitterness lingered. Their feud was not explosive in the media, but it was corrosive in the locker room. Teammates noticed the tension, the clipped conversations, the lack of warmth between star and coach. The world saw a winning duo, but behind closed doors lived a relationship marked by distance and quiet disdain. The cold truth is this: Tony Dorsett never forgave Tom Landry for trying to cage him. To Dorsett, the brilliance of his career was achieved despite Landry's system, not because of it. The coach may have been immortalized in bronze, but in the runner's heart, Landry remained the man who clipped his wings. The grudge lived on, and even today, when fans celebrate that golden era, Dorsett's memories are haunted not only by triumph, but by the shadow of a coach he could never reconcile with. In Dallas, quarterbacks were kings. The spotlight, the endorsements, the glory of leadership always seemed to orbit around the man under center. For Tony Dorsett, that dynamic was both motivating and maddening. He knew his role was essential. Yet time and again he felt like the supporting act in a play where the quarterback was cast as the hero. When he first entered the league, Dorsett shared the backfield with Roger Staubach, the Navy legend who embodied discipline and grace under pressure. Staubach was the face of the Cowboys, beloved by fans and trusted implicitly by Landry. Dorsett respected Staubach's ability, but the relationship was distant. Staubach lived by a military code, speaking the language of duty and order. Dorsett was fire, instinct, and rhythm. Their personalities clashed, not in loud arguments, but in a constant undercurrent of difference. Dorsett wanted more carries, more freedom, more recognition. Staubach believed in the system, the hierarchy that placed coach and quarterback at the top. The friction only grew sharper when Staubach retired after the 1979 season and Danny White took over. White was competent, skilled, and loyal to Landry's structure. But he was not Staubach. Dorsett, already weary of being asked to carry the team in silence, looked at White as another reminder that quarterbacks would always be protected, praised, and excused, while the running back absorbed the punishment, and rarely the glory. The defining moment of this divide came during the early 80s. In a critical playoff game, Dorsett was at his peak, slashing through defenses with vision and power. But when the game's pressure rose, the play calling leaned on the quarterback. Even when Dorsett was carving yards at will, he felt ignored, sidelined by a philosophy that glorified passes over runs, quarterbacks over backs. Watching incompletions pile up while he stood idle on the sideline was a humiliation he never forgot. Afterward, Dorsett's frustration boiled over. He questioned decisions, clashed with teammates, and made it clear that he was tired of being undervalued. The tension between him and White became more than professional. It was personal. rooted in the belief that his talent was being wasted so the quarterback could chase validation. To the outside world, the Cowboys looked unified. To those inside, the fractures were obvious. Dorsett's resentment toward the quarterback culture of Dallas was no secret. He saw the imbalance in how victories and defeats were narrated, with quarterbacks lionized while running backs bled without acknowledgement. Years later, Dorsett admitted that he felt trapped in a system where the quarterback always came first. Staubach may have been revered. White may have been loyal. But to Dorsett, both were part of a structure that suppressed his voice and diminished his value. The cold truth is simple. Tony Dorsett believed he was every bit as essential as the quarterback, yet never treated that way. The divide between runner and passer was more than tactical. It was a reminder of hierarchy, one that scarred his pride and fueled a lifelong grudge against the pedestal reserved for quarterbacks in Dallas. The rivalry was never spoken loudly, but it lived quietly in his heart, and it never died. Few things angered Tony Dorsett more than being asked to share the spotlight. By the mid-'80s, he had proven everything. He was a Super Bowl champion, a rushing champion, and already carving a path toward Canton. Yet, in 1986, the Dallas Cowboys brought in Herschel Walker, a Heisman winner from Georgia with the physique of a sprinter and the strength of a powerlifter. The move sent a message, one that Dorsett could not ignore. His role, his identity, his place as the heartbeat of the Dallas offense was under threat. Walker was no ordinary addition. He arrived with fanfare, the new face of the backfield, the man who could catch passes, run inside, and line up anywhere on the field. To fans, it seemed like a dream pairing. To Dorsett, it felt like betrayal. He had carried the offense for nearly a decade, through injuries and frustrations, and now he was being asked to split the very thing that defined him: the carries. The friction was immediate. Dorsett made it clear in interviews and private conversations that he was unhappy with the arrangement. He did not want to be part of a two-headed monster. He wanted to be the monster. Sharing touches was not just an inconvenience. It was an insult to everything he had built. The defining moment of this rivalry came in the opening weeks of the 1986 season. In one nationally televised game, Walker and Dorsett alternated series. The offense sputtered. Neither back found rhythm. Cameras caught Dorsett on the sideline, helmet in hand, seething with frustration. When asked about it later, he gave a blunt response: "If they don't want me here, trade me." That statement was not just a burst of anger. It was a declaration of war. The locker room felt the tension. Coaches were forced to navigate two stars, one established and bitter, the other rising and eager. Fans debated which back was better, further fueling the division. For Dorsett, it was humiliation. He was a Hall of Fame talent, reduced to rotating series with a newcomer. The truth is that both men were victims of a flawed plan. Walker was talented, but the scheme diluted their impact. Dorsett, however, viewed the entire experiment as a direct affront to his legacy. He saw it as Dallas choosing to replace him before his time. The whispers that he was aging, that he could no longer carry the full load, cut deeper than any hit on the field. Eventually, Dorsett's resentment forced the Cowboys' hand. By 1988, his relationship with the franchise had soured beyond repair. He was traded to the Denver Broncos, leaving behind the team he had carried for 11 seasons. The experiment with Walker had succeeded in only one thing: driving out a legend. The cold truth is this: Tony Dorsett never forgave the Cowboys for bringing in Herschel Walker. To him, it was a betrayal disguised as strategy, a decision that disrespected his greatness and shortened his reign in Dallas. The grudge never faded. Even years later, when asked about that period, Dorsett spoke not of partnership, but of insult. For him, sharing the backfield was never about teamwork. It was about being pushed aside. And he never forgot. Tony Dorsett ran for more than 12,000 yards in the NFL, a number that places him among the immortals. He broke games open with 99-yard brilliance, lifted Dallas to a Super Bowl crown, and embodied the elegance of a position built on speed and vision. Yet for all that, Dorsett often felt invisible in the narratives spun by the media. The spotlight he craved never seemed to shine fully on him. It burned hotter on others, while he carried the load in silence. The Dallas Cowboys were America's team. Their star glistened across television screens from coast to coast. Yet, even in this golden stage, the media's adoration seemed to orbit around different figures. Landry's fedora became a symbol, Staubach was cast as the noble leader, and later Danny White was framed as the successor carrying hope. Dorsett? He was often described as quiet, moody, or temperamental. The press painted him not as the face of Dallas, but as an enigmatic figure difficult to embrace. This characterization struck him as unfair. He was not flamboyant, not a self-promoter, but he was consistent and brilliant. Week after week, he produced, often saving the offense. Yet the media rarely celebrated his artistry. Instead, they latched onto narratives of conflict. Reports highlighted his disputes with coaches, his frustration over carries, his dissatisfaction with play calling. Dorsett grew weary of opening the paper or turning on the television only to see his name linked to controversy, rather than greatness. The defining moment came after his 99-yard touchdown run in 1983. It was one of the most iconic plays in NFL history, a record untouched to this day. Dorsett should have been hailed as the central hero. Yet headlines the next morning framed the victory around Dallas's defense and Landry's coaching. Some reports even critiqued the team for not feeding Dorsett more, as if his record-setting run was not the ultimate statement of brilliance. For Dorsett, the lack of full recognition was salt in the wound. He began to believe that his story was being rewritten while he was still living it. While other stars became household names with glowing coverage, he felt underappreciated, mischaracterized, and sometimes deliberately diminished. The press painted him as difficult, when in truth he was demanding respect. He wanted to be celebrated as more than a cog in the Cowboys' machine. The resentment festered. Dorsett carried it into interviews, where his clipped answers and visible irritation only deepened the narrative of a moody star. It became a cycle. The media wrote of his frustration, which fueled more frustration, which fueled more negative coverage. Over time, his relationship with the press became adversarial, not collaborative. Even after retirement, when Hall of Fame induction cemented his greatness, the scars of disrespect lingered. Dorsett has spoken openly about how he felt overshadowed during his career, treated as if his brilliance was secondary to the larger myth of Dallas. The cold truth is this: Tony Dorsett never forgave the media for overlooking his greatness. He believed that his name should have been uttered alongside Peyton and Campbell, celebrated as a national icon, not just a Cowboy star. Instead, he felt written out of his own story, remembered more for disputes than for dominance. The grudge remained. And when he looked back at his career, the applause of fans often felt louder than the words of those who should have recorded his legacy with fairness. For Tony Dorsett, the most painful truth was not a coach, not a quarterback, not even a rival in the backfield. It was the betrayal of the very franchise he had carried for more than a decade. The Dallas Cowboys, the team that traded 4 draft picks to bring him in, the team whose star he made shine brighter, ultimately became the source of his deepest bitterness. When Dallas drafted Herschel Walker in 1986, the fracture began. But the true betrayal unfolded in the years that followed. The organization no longer saw Dorsett as untouchable. Whispers spread that he was aging, that his best years were gone. The man who had rushed for 12,000 yards, who had bled for the team, was suddenly treated like a replaceable part. In 1987, the insult deepened. During the strike-shortened season, Dallas management made decisions that marginalized his role further. He found himself splitting carries, watching his identity as the franchise back erode. By 1988, the unthinkable happened. The Cowboys traded him to the Denver Broncos for a mid-round draft pick, as if the greatest back in their history was worth no more than a gamble. For Dorsett, the pain was not about geography. It was about loyalty. He had given everything to the star on his helmet, and in return, the organization discarded him. The trade symbolized not just the end of his career in Dallas, but the erasure of what he had sacrificed. The iconic moment of betrayal was not on the field, but in the phone call that delivered the news. Dorsett, stunned and furious, packed his bags not as a celebrated legend, but as an afterthought. The Denver experiment would last only 1 season before injuries ended his career. But the scars of that final act in Dallas never healed. Even decades later, Dorsett's voice carries the wound. He speaks of respect denied, of being pushed aside for the next new face. He does not hide his anger at how the franchise he defined treated him in the end. The Cowboys built their empire on his legs, but when time tested them, they turned away. The betrayal was not only organizational, it was personal. Dorsett had envisioned retiring as a Cowboy, walking off the field in blue and silver, his name forever linked to the star. Instead, his last carries came in Denver orange, a reminder that the business of football had stripped him of the ending he deserved. The cold truth is this: Tony Dorsett never forgave the Dallas Cowboys for the way they ended his story. The franchise that had made him a champion also broke his heart. To fans, he remains a Cowboy immortal, his 99-yard run forever replayed. To Dorsett, the memory is more complicated. It is triumph wrapped in betrayal, glory shadowed by bitterness. His greatest grudge was not against an opponent, but against the star itself, the symbol of a team that chose to discard him. That truth defined him. And it never died. Not every hidden truth in Tony Dorsett's career came from rivals or management. Some came from inside his own locker room. Among them was Thomas Hollywood Henderson, the flamboyant linebacker whose personality was as explosive as his play. Henderson thrived on attention, his voice always the loudest, his swagger impossible to ignore. Dorsett was different. He spoke less, carried himself with quiet fire, and let his runs define him. That contrast created tension. When Henderson once suggested that Dallas needed backs who could endure the grind, the words stung Dorsett deeply. Henderson did not mention his name, but everyone in the room understood who was being targeted. For Dorsett, the remark was not just criticism. It was betrayal. He prided himself on durability, on running through pain and pressure, on never shying away from punishment. To hear a teammate hint otherwise cut through his pride. The defining moment came after a divisional loss in the late 70s. Henderson, frustrated and loose with his words, made his comment to the press. Days later, Dorsett answered in the only way he knew. He shredded the opposing defense, piling up yards with ferocity. His performance a statement that silenced doubt but not the bitterness that lingered. Henderson's career soon spiraled out of control through scandal and addiction. Dorsett's career marched toward Canton. Yet even when Henderson sought redemption later in life, Dorsett admitted that forgiveness was not easy. In his eyes, respect was currency, and once it was taken, it could never be fully restored. The cold truth is this: Tony Dorsett never forgave Hollywood Henderson for questioning his toughness. To him, it was a wound that symbolized the fragility of loyalty, even among those who wore the same uniform. Tony Dorsett's career is often remembered in snapshots. The 99-yard run gliding into history. The rookie season capped by a Super Bowl victory. The silver and blue blur slicing through defenses with elegance unmatched. Yet beneath those highlights lived a man shaped as much by conflict as by glory. His story was not only one of yards and touchdowns, but of tension, resentment, and scars that never healed. Every great player is defined by struggle. For Dorsett, the struggle was not only against defenders but against systems, structures, and narratives that limited him. His battles with Tom Landry represented the eternal clash between order and freedom. Landry's machine demanded precision, while Dorsett's genius thrived on instinct. He won games by trusting his vision, yet felt diminished when his creativity was treated as rebellion. That tension created not only personal frustration, but also fueled his determination to prove himself, to outrun the cage he believed his coach built around him. His distance from quarterbacks like Staubach and White told another story, one of hierarchy and imbalance. In Dallas, the quarterback was king. The running back, no matter how brilliant, was seen as a supporting actor. Dorsett's pride would not accept that. He knew his runs tilted fields, that his presence forced defenses to bend, and yet recognition always seemed to belong to someone else. That quiet rivalry with the quarterback culture revealed a deeper truth. The Cowboys dynasty was a house of competing egos, not perfect harmony. Then came Herschel Walker, the moment when loyalty collapsed. For Dorsett, the arrival of a new star was not opportunity, but insult. He saw it as betrayal, disguised as strategy. A decision that sent a clear message that his greatness was being questioned. Sharing carries was more than a tactical experiment. It was an erasure of identity. When Dallas traded him to Denver, the final cut was delivered. A legend was discarded, his legacy with the star clouded by bitterness. The media's role compounded his frustration. While other backs like Walter Payton or Earl Campbell were celebrated with glowing narratives, Dorsett was often cast as moody or uncooperative. His artistry was overshadowed by reports of disputes. His greatness, undeniable on the field, was framed through the lens of conflict off it. To him, this was disrespect. He had earned reverence, but often received criticism. The press never told his story the way he believed it should be told, and that wound followed him long after retirement. Even the betrayals inside the locker room left their mark. Hollywood Henderson's loose words questioning his toughness became a reminder that even among teammates, loyalty was fragile. To Dorsett, toughness was not just about taking hits, it was about carrying the weight of expectation year after year. To have that questioned was not only insulting, it was unforgettable. Yet when all the grudges are gathered together, a different picture emerges. These scars, these resentments, did not diminish Tony Dorsett. They defined him. They became fuel, sharpening the edge of a man who might otherwise have been content with glory. Without those clashes, perhaps he would have run differently, with less anger, less fire. But with them, he ran as if chased by betrayal itself. His legacy is therefore not one of peace, but of contradiction. He was elegance and anger, grace and defiance, celebrated, yet underappreciated. His name sits among the immortals, a Hall of Famer whose runs will live forever, yet his heart carried bitterness that no accolade could erase. The beauty of his 99-yard run is inseparable from the pain of how Dallas ended his story. Triumph and betrayal, inseparable. Today, when fans speak of Tony Dorsett, they remember the highlights. They see the blur on their screens, the number 33 dashing past defenders. But for the man himself, legacy is more complicated. It is the sound of cheers mixed with the silence of respect denied. It is a ring that shines bright, but also a scar that never healed. Beyond trophies and glory, it was grudges, betrayals, and dark truths that defined Tony Dorsett. His legend was not built only on yards and touchdowns. It was built on conflict, on the hunger to prove himself against not just opponents, but against coaches, teammates, and even the franchise that turned its back on him. That is his story. And that is his truth. Tony Dorsett's life in football was more than a collection of highlights. It was a journey shaped by brilliance and betrayal, by loyalty and the lack of it. His story forces us to look deeper, to see that behind every touchdown lies sacrifice, behind every record lies conflict, and behind every legend lies pain that never truly fades. Now, the question is yours. Which truth shocked you the most? Was it the quiet war with Tom Landry? The clash with quarterbacks? The insult of sharing carries with Herschel Walker? The constant misrepresentation by the media? Or the final betrayal from the Cowboys themselves? Each scar reveals a different layer of the man behind the myth. Perhaps you see him as a victim of circumstance, a star who deserved more recognition than he ever received. Or perhaps you believe the very bitterness that haunted him also fueled his greatness, pushing him to prove his worth every Sunday. Was Tony Dorsett robbed of the respect he deserved? Or was his fire sharpened by the very grudges he carried? At NFL Hidden Truths, we believe stories like his deserve to be remembered in full. Not only the yards and the rings, but the shadows, the battles, and the secrets that shaped football's golden era. If you enjoyed uncovering the hidden truths of Tony Dorsett, make sure you subscribe to our channel. We will continue to bring you the untold stories of legends from the 60s through the 90s, the era when football became mythology. Leave us a comment below. Tell us which of Dorsett's rivalries or betrayals struck you the hardest. And join us again, as we reveal more truths the game has tried to hide.